The anime begins with a young man lying unconscious on the ground, and when he finally awakens, he finds himself in a world entirely different from the one he once knew. Instead of fear, he is overwhelmed with joy at having been transported to another realm. With confidence, he says to himself, "Now my life will improve, and I will live the life I always dreamed of." Yet before he can finish his words, the kingdom is rocked by a massive explosion. He is immediately seized and cast out beyond its walls, for no one knows who he is, nor do they see any worth in him. Shocked, the young man realizes that what has happened is the complete opposite of what he had expected. He wanders aimlessly until at last he collapses beneath a bridge, thinking desperately about how he will survive in this new life, especially now, as he is starving and penniless, unable even to buy food. While he is lost in thought, a girl crossing the bridge notices him. She descends to check on him and asks if he needs help. Without hesitation, the young man tells her his story and admits that he is not of this world but has been transported into a parallel one. The girl calms him gently and reassures him that she will help. She introduces herself as Meno, a priestess of the kingdom's church, and explains that it is her duty to aid the lost ones like him. She tells him that if he wishes to have money for food, he must work with his own hands, and so she offers to take him to the church where he can earn a living. The young man agrees, and together they begin walking toward the church. On the way, he asks her about the kingdom they are in, and Meno begins to explain. Eventually, they arrive at a city that looks entirely Japanese. The young man is astonished to hear everyone speaking the Japanese language, and he asks her why. Meno replies that in their world, countless souls from other realms drift in, and they are called the Lost Ones. Most of these souls, she says, come from the nation of Japan, and so their culture has blended deeply with Japanese culture, to the point that there now exists a fully Japanese city within the kingdom. She then goes on to explain the social structure of the kingdom. Our society is divided into 3 classes, she tells him. The first is the common people, who make up 90% of the population. The second is the class of nobles and the wealthy, which includes the kings and princes. The third is the class known as the Faust, which consists of priests and clergy like myself. The law of the Faust is enforced upon all, even the kings, with no distinction between people. The young man is left in awe of their system of justice and governance, and he concludes that he will belong among the common folk, for he has no extraordinary power that might elevate him to nobility. Meno smiles and asks how he can be so certain he has no power. He explains that the kingdom's guards tested him with the magical crystal, and no ability was revealed. This was not the case for the girl who had been transported with him from his world, for she radiated with magical energy so great that they were forced to confine her alone in a separate chamber. At once, Meno realizes that another lost one had arrived alongside him, so she contacts her assistant Momo and instructs her to search for this other soul. By then, Meno and the young man have reached the church. He notices that it is small and abandoned, but she tells him that this is where he will begin his work. Yet before assigning him any duty, she insists he must retake the test of his magical abilities, for it is impossible for a lost one to cross into this world without the power to do so. Convinced, the young man focuses deeply, summoning his hidden energy, and at last he discovers it. The ability to make objects before him vanish through magic. Overjoyed with this revelation, he speaks excitedly to Meno, delighted by his newfound gift. But at that very moment, Meno draws her sword and suddenly plunges it into him. The force of the strike sends him crashing lifeless to the ground. Standing over him in sorrow, Meno whispers, "I know this is not your fault, that you are the victim and I am the villain, but this is my duty. I am the executioner of the lost ones who arrive in this kingdom, for they bring nothing but ruin upon themselves and upon the realm." At that moment, a mysterious memory resurfaced in Meno's mind, one that had haunted her countless times before. She saw herself within a Japanese school, and strangely, everyone there was her friend. Then her closest companion appeared, yet no matter how often the memory repeated, Meno could never see her face or recognize her identity. After completing her mission, Meno contacted the head of the church, Orwell, and informed her that another soul had been transported alongside the young man, though its whereabouts remained unknown. Orwell thanked her for all her efforts in safeguarding the kingdom and promised to investigate the matter of the missing lost soul herself. She even offered Meno a chance to rest, reminding her, "It has been 10 years since we saved you from death and brought you into the church, and in all that time you have never once taken a leave." At those words, Meno drifted back into her memories from a decade earlier when she had still been a child living with her family in her hometown. The city lay in ruins, destroyed by the devastating magical powers of a lost soul who had annihilated everyone, including Meno's parents. When that soul finally awoke from the spell that had driven her into darkness, she collapsed in grief, crying that she could not even remember what she had done. It was then that a priestess named Flare appeared and struck down the lost soul. Yet even after her death, the soul's power did not vanish. Instead, it erupted into the form of a massive ice beast. Flare fought the creature with unwavering courage until she finally destroyed it. At that moment, Orwell appeared, thanked Flare for her assistance, and declared that Menno, who had lost her entire family, would now be placed under Flare's protection. Flare agreed, vowing to raise her and take her to the church. That was the first time Menno ever laid eyes on Priestess Flare. She was jolted out of her memories by the voice of her assistant, Momo, who had arrived with crucial news about the second lost soul, revealing that it was hidden within the royal palace. Momo also handed her a maid's uniform, a disguise that would allow her to infiltrate the palace and complete her mission without drawing suspicion. As they discussed their plan, a noise echoed from outside. Momo warned in alarm, "It's the king's guards. They must be searching for me after I fought one of them and tortured him to death." Menno grew angry at her recklessness, but resolved to face the problem herself. Stepping outside, she found the guards were indeed after her. They sought to eliminate her, for she had been executing every lost soul summoned by the king from other worlds. A fierce battle broke out. Menno displayed not only her exceptional combat skills but also her mastery of magic, shielding herself from the guards' strikes. When they witnessed her magical power, they recalled Priestess Flare, for the resemblance in ability was unmistakable. In that moment, Menno declared, "Yes, I am the successor of Priestess Flare." With swift precision, she cut them down one after another until none remained standing. Once her battle with the guards had ended, Menno moved at once toward the royal palace to accomplish her second mission. At the same time, we saw the lost soul she sought. Her name was Akari, a high school student. One of the king's maids entered her chamber, presented her with a new gown, and informed her that she could not leave her room without the king's permission. Stepping out onto the balcony, Akari gazed at the grandeur of the palace, whispering to herself, "This place is beautiful, and my chamber is among the finest in the palace. Yet I feel imprisoned. I feel uneasy, as though there is some hidden mystery behind this journey into a parallel world." While she pondered aloud, she was startled to see a girl in a maid's uniform appear before her on the balcony. That girl was none other than Meino. Quickly, Meino pulled her inside and told her they had to escape immediately, for the king intended to kill her. Spinning a lie, she said, "The king summoned you from your world only to dispose of you. Before you, there was another boy who came from your world as well. He barely managed to flee from the king's grasp before being struck down. He told me where to find you so I could save you, but his wounds were too grave and I could not rescue him in time. He died." Then Menno introduced herself as a priestess of the church, claiming she was responsible for Akari's protection. Innocent and kind-hearted, Akari believed every word. Trusting Menno completely, she fled with her from the palace. With calculated skill, Menno led her through the palace's hidden passages, but at the end of the path she abandoned her. Akari ran desperately after her, but when she looked ahead, she found nothing. Menno had vanished without a trace. At that moment, Menno was clinging to the ceiling of the chamber, and in a sudden strike, she attacked Akari and stabbed her, causing the girl to collapse onto the floor, bleeding heavily. Menno believed her mission had been accomplished, yet what happened next shocked her deeply. From Akari's body emerged a brilliant light that shaped itself into a magical clock suspended in the air. The bleeding stopped, and her wound vanished entirely, as if it had never existed. The greater shock came when Akari rose to her feet completely unharmed, with no memory of what had just transpired, not even Menno's blade piercing her. The only thing she remembered was fleeing together with Menno from the king. Confused and unsettled, Menno realized she had never witnessed such magic before. She immediately contacted Momo, instructing her to distract the guards until she could spirit Akari out of the palace, for the plan had now changed. Momo acted without hesitation, and Menno successfully escaped with Akari, bringing her back to the church. Once there, Akari collapsed into a deep sleep from exhaustion, while Menno hurried to report everything to Orwell, telling her of the strange magic Akari possessed. Orwell explained that this was known as pure concept magic, the most powerful form of sorcery a lost soul could ever wield, and one that could only belong to a heart both innocent and pure. Menno replied that this meant Akari was no threat to the kingdom, for she was truly pure and incapable of harm. But Orwell contradicted her, warning that such power could one day turn inward and control Akari herself, and if the king were to harness this pure concept magic for his own ends, the danger would be far greater than any other form of sorcery. Troubled, Menno asked how they could possibly rid themselves of her when she could even save herself from death. Orwell then revealed the final solution. Within the Church of Jarm was a mystical chamber that erased both magical powers and their wielder from existence within hours. This, she said, was the most certain way to eliminate Akari and her dangerous gift. Meno agreed to the plan and resolved to carry it out. The day ended on that note, and by the following morning Meno went to wake Akari, telling her they must flee the city immediately. She spoke of Jarm, convincing her that the city held the key to returning her to her original world. She added, "If you remain here, the king will kill you and use your body in his sorceries." Akari was at first delighted by the thought of returning home, yet sorrow clouded her heart as she told Meno, "I have grown fond of you. I feel as though fate brought us together to be friends. I was lonely, even in my true world, and so when I met you, I trusted you and hoped to spend more time by your side." Her words struck Meno deeply, filling her with guilt, for she knew that in only a few days she herself would be the one to end Akari's life. Later, Meno spoke with Momo, who was irritated by Akari's closeness to her. Jealous and possessive, Momo saw herself as Meno's only true companion and pressed for Akari's elimination as soon as possible. But Meno reassured her, saying Akari would die in their world within a few days, returning to her own. She then asked about the train tickets to Jarm, and Momo produced them. Unwilling to let Meno travel alone with such a dangerous girl, Momo insisted on accompanying them. Reluctantly, Meno agreed, and so the three of them departed for the train station. Once there, Meno told Akari to remain where she was while she bought food for them, warning her not to use her magic, for the king's guards were everywhere, searching for her. While Meno was away, Akari noticed a small child with a wound on her hand. Overcome with compassion, she could not restrain herself and prepared to use her magic to heal the injury. At that very moment, Meno spotted her and also saw the guards closing in. Without hesitation, she cast a spell into the sky, creating a dazzling distraction that drew everyone's attention. She then rushed to stop Akari, scolding her for nearly revealing her power, and hurried her onto the train. Meanwhile, in the very same station, Princess Ashuha, the daughter of the king, appeared. The guards were searching for her after she had left the palace without escort. When they found her, they informed her that her father demanded her return, but she refused, declaring, "I oppose what the king is doing, and I oppose all of his misguided decisions. Nothing will force me to remain in a place where I reject everything happening within it. That is why I am traveling to Jarm, and none of you will follow me." With that, she left them behind and boarded the train, the very same train that carried Meno, Akari, and Momo on their journey to Jarm. At that moment, Meno noticed how joyful Akari was during the journey, which made her whisper to herself, "I hope Akari enjoys every moment of this trip, for its end will also mark the end of her life." Suddenly, the passengers were shocked by an attack on the train carried out by a gang who threatened to kill anyone that dared to move. Fear gripped Akari, and she turned to Meno asking, "Who are they? And how do they have weapons just like the ones from my world?" Meno explained that they were terrorists who had targeted the train to kidnap Princess Ashuha, who was aboard, in order to use her as leverage against the king to demand the release of their imprisoned leader. As for the weapons, she clarified that their world also possessed such arms, but they were forbidden by law, and anyone caught with one would be imprisoned immediately. One of the criminals noticed them and stormed over, shouting suspiciously about their conversation. Seeing Meno's Faustian robes, he realized she was a priestess and attempted to search her, suspecting she might be armed. But Akari boldly stepped in front of her and declared, "No one will touch her. I will protect her, and I will not allow anyone to lay a hand on her." Meno smirked with disdain, then with a single motion from her spellbook struck one criminal down, and with a mere gesture silenced another, saying to Akari, "You would need 100 years to gain the skills necessary to protect me." She then ordered her to remain with the other passengers and not move. Soon after, Momo informed her that there were 13 criminals spread throughout the train, with 2 of them already in the engine car. Meno hurried toward it, while Momo climbed onto the roof to observe the situation. There, she suddenly encountered Princess Ashuha, who, recognizing Momo's Faustian garb, launched an attack without mercy. As Meno advanced through the train, she could hear the sounds of their battle above, but did not intervene, knowing Momo could handle herself. A fierce duel erupted between the two. Although Ashuha was older and more experienced, Momo showed no fear, and their contest raged on evenly matched, until Momo finally managed to knock Ashuha off the train. Yet the princess was not defeated easily. She pulled Momo down with her, and the two plummeted together. Meanwhile, Meno reached the engine car, swiftly eliminated the criminals there, and reassured the workers that the train would now arrive at the city safely. But then, something unexpected occurred. The criminals began laughing eerily as glowing crystals emerged from their chests. The moment the crystals left their bodies, their forms disintegrated into nothingness. This happened not only to 2 of them, but to all 13, and the crystals fused together into a single massive gem that summoned a gigantic monster, blocking Meno's path. With no choice left, she prepared to fight the beast to save herself and the passengers. An intense battle erupted. During the struggle, the train's fuel tank was destroyed, and Mino nearly lost hope of victory. At that moment, Akari appeared before her, saying she had come to check on her. Enraged that she had disobeyed orders to stay put, Mino scolded her, but the monster closed in quickly. With no time to waste, Mino drew her dagger, invoked her spell of self-destruction, and plunged it into the monster. This time, the spell succeeded, and the creature was destroyed. Yet Mino realized a new danger. The train was still speeding uncontrollably and had to be stopped at once. Exhausted and drained of power, she turned to Akari, saying, "I need you to lend me your magic so that I can stop this train and save the passengers." Without hesitation, Akari agreed. Even knowing that the transfer of power would cause her immense pain, she did not falter. Together they climbed to the front car. Akari channeled her magic into Meno, who managed at the very last moment to halt the train before disaster struck, saving themselves and everyone aboard. Relief washed over Meno, who thanked Akari for saving them. The day ended there. By the following morning, the train had been repaired and resumed its journey toward the city. Akari, drained of her strength, fell into a deep sleep, while Momo returned from the forest after her fall with Ashuha. Reunited, she and Meno discussed the bizarre assault by the strange criminals. Then Meno confessed, "I still do not understand the power Akari granted me. Was it the pure concept magic that turned back time and saved the train?" To which Momo replied, "Could Akari truly be so kind-hearted as to use her power to save all these people?" The question left Meno in doubt, and she asked herself, is Akari truly as innocent as she appears? In that moment, she remembered the words of her teacher, Flare, who once told her, "Trust no one, no matter who they are." The memory pulled her into a flashback from 10 years ago, when she had awakened in a ruined city, unable to recall anything of what had happened, knowing only her own name. At that moment, Meno heard the voice of an elderly woman speaking. It was Orwell, addressing a priestess before her, saying, "Have I not warned you time and again not to act alone in such dangerous missions?" It was then revealed that this priestess was none other than Flare, who was always taking on the most difficult tasks without ever asking for help. At that moment, both of them noticed Meno, the sole survivor of the destroyed city where all her people had perished. Orwell left her in Flare's care, saying that this girl would be her responsibility from now on, and then departed. Flare approached Meno and asked for her name and her family, but Meno replied that she remembered nothing except her name. When Flare tested her magical ability, she was astonished by the strength of her power and told her she would make a perfect priestess, yet she did not force her to follow, instead giving her some money so she could survive and then walked away. But Meno refused to leave her and followed along. Flare did not stop her, saying, "I will allow you to accompany me as long as you do not tire." Thus Meno continued the journey with her, and soon learned that Flare was an executioner, tasked with killing all the lost souls that entered their world. Out of her admiration for Flare, Meno decided she wanted to become like her. She told her of her decision, saying, "Train me to become an executioner like you." Flare accepted her request and brought her to the church, where she began training alongside other volunteer children in the use of daggers and swift killing techniques. Meno quickly outshone all the other students, who were visibly shaken and fearful at the thought of becoming executioners. This drove her to speak with Flare, saying, "Let me be the only executioner and spare the others, for they cannot endure killing anyone or defending the kingdom." Flare warned her that such a burden would be heavy, but Meno insisted. In that moment, Flare saw herself in Meno, her courage and her strength reflected in her eyes, and decided to pass on all her experience and skills, declaring, "You are the only one worthy of being my successor, the successor of Flare." Meno awoke from her memories at the sound of Akari, who had just opened her eyes, surprised to have slept for so long. Meno reassured her that this was natural after the great energy she had expended, and told her that they had finally arrived in the city of Jarm. They disembarked from the train, and Akari marveled at the beauty of the enchanted city, asking Meno if they could take a stroll through its streets. But Meno replied, "We must first go to meet Orwell, for the most important matter now is your return to your world. Once the ritual is prepared, I promise we will go out together as you wish." Akari agreed after Meno's promise. On their way, Akari saw a great palace and assumed it was their destination, but Meno corrected her, saying, "That is the palace of the nobles and rulers of this city. They are always in conflict with the Faust, for the Faust enforce the law upon them without regard for their social status, and they also constantly interfere in the process of lost soul transfers, seeking to seize their power for their own gain." Afterward, Meno brought her to the city's grand church, which left Akari in awe. There they found Orwell waiting, who welcomed them warmly and said to Akari, "I know the journey has been difficult for you, and harder still to suddenly find yourself in a world different from your own. But do not worry, I have arranged the ritual for your return. It will, however, take 2 days to be prepared." Then Orwell turned to Meno and said, "Do you remember the cases of the missing girls I told you about which have have spread widely throughout Jarm. I want you to use this opportunity to investigate them. I trust your judgment and your abilities. She handed her the case files and Mano promised she would find a solution quickly, but this clearly upset Akari, which became evident once they reached their room in the church. Mino asked her what troubled her, and Akari replied, "You lied to me. You will not keep your promise to go out with me, because the 2 days I have left before returning to my world, you will spend on this investigation. Even though the case has been here all along, yet I will disappear from your life in just 2 days." Then she left in anger. Guilt weighed heavily on Meno, and she resolved to spend time with Akari as promised. For that reason, she asked Momo to take over the investigation in her stead. She also told her that the crystals found in the bodies of the criminals had been crafted by a professional and that she needed her to uncover who had created them as quickly as possible. At that time, Momo suspected that one of the nobles of Yarm might be the one who created the crystals, and so she told Meno that she would investigate the matter further. After that, Meno went to cheer up Akari and told her she would take her out, but Akari apologized with emotion, saying, "I was selfish, thinking only of myself and my happiness, without considering you. You have been working without rest all this time, and that must trouble you as well." Meno was moved by her words and replied, "I love my work, and never grow tired of it, and I have a surprise for you. Tomorrow, I will go out with you." This filled Akari with joy, and she eagerly prepared for the outing the next day. When the promised day came, Meno indeed went out with Akari, taking her on a tour across the city, from its historical landmarks to a boat ride along the river. Akari enjoyed herself immensely, returning to the church at the end of the day exhausted yet overjoyed. She thanked Meno, saying, "Thank you. You were the reason I lived such a happy day. I love you, and I wished I could spend more time with you and remain friends forever." Her words pierced Meno's heart like fire, for she knew that on the next day, Akari's life would end at her own hands. Later, Meno contacted Momo and asked about the results of her investigation. Momo told her that after much searching, she discovered that the one behind the crystals found in the criminals was also responsible for the cases of the missing girls. Moreover, she found something strange in the city. The gang had been residing in the old royal palace. She said she would go the next day to search the palace herself. Meno urged her to be cautious and to protect herself, promising to give her a gift once she completed the mission. The following day, Meno went out with Akari to the city's markets, where they came across a cart selling handmade gifts. Meno stopped and crafted 2 ribbons for the hair with her own hands. Akari thought the ribbons were for her, but was shocked when Meno told her they were for Momo. This saddened her, but when Meno noticed her disappointment, she made another ribbon just for her. Akari was delighted and thanked her warmly. After their time at the markets, it was finally time for Akari to return to her original world. They went together to the magical chamber where the ritual would take place. There, Orwell awaited them, embracing Akari and saying, "Everything is ready for your return. Do not worry, you will feel no pain." She then asked her to sit on the chair in the center of the room. At that moment, deep sorrow appeared on Akari's face as she prepared to part with Meno, to whom she had grown so attached. She promised her, "I was happy with the few days I spent with you, Meno." Meno too was greatly affected by the farewell, and no matter how she tried to conceal her emotions, she could not. Orwell noticed this and asked if she had grown attached to Akari. Meno lied, replying, "No, she is just a lost soul. My duty is to kill her. I must be like my teacher, Flair, who never let emotions sway her, and that is why she became the greatest priestess of the church." Meanwhile, Momo had arrived at the old palace, where she discovered a secret passage underground. She descended to investigate, but felt a strange movement within the corridor. There, Princess Ashuha appeared before her for the second time. The princess engaged her in conversation, asking why she was there, but Momo refused to disclose anything, stating only that she was on a secret mission. Ashuha explained that she was exploring the palace to uncover the extent of the king's corruption and their deeds. She then tried to provoke Momo into revealing her true purpose, tugging at her hair ribbons. The gesture enraged Momo to the point that she threatened to kill her if she ever tried it again. In that moment, Ashuha realized how precious the ribbons were to Momo, while Momo herself remembered her very first memory with Meno, when Meno had tied her hair with those ribbons and told her how beautiful she looked wearing them. As they continued to search the secret passageways, they discovered a forbidden magical chamber in the cellar, identical to the one in the church. Momo said, "Surely the nobles and kings use this chamber to summon souls from other worlds." Ashuha agreed, but added, "The story is incomplete, for no king could know the details of the secret chamber in the church unless aided by someone within the church itself. This means the church was helping the king with the summoning rituals for unknown reasons." These words made Momo piece the threads together and finally understand what was truly happening. She rushed to contact Meno to warn her. Although communication was strangely difficult, as if some force was trying to prevent it, she finally succeeded in sending her message. "Beware. The true danger is Orwell." Suddenly, a massive dragon entered the chamber, and Momo realized she could not defeat it alone. so when Ashuha proposed that they join forces to slay it together, Momo agreed without hesitation. At that same moment, Momo's message reached Meno, who was stunned by its ominous content. Orwell noticed the change in Meno's expression and said, "I tried every way to prevent you from communicating with Momo, but it seems your magic is truly strong and you managed to receive her message." At that moment, Meno was struck with overwhelming fear as she finally understood Momo's message. She quickly withdrew and launched a spell against Orwell, but Orwell easily evaded the attack and countered with a strike so powerful, it shattered the ground beneath them. Suddenly, Meno found herself in a secret underground chamber. Meanwhile, Akari was watching in shock, and when she tried to run to save Meno, the guards caught her and forced her back into the chair. As for Meno, she was confronted by the prisoners who had once been with the criminals, and the greatest shock came when she saw the corpses of the missing girls. Realizing at last that the crystals were forged from their very bodies, Orwell descended into the chamber and said to Meno, "You discovered the secret faster than I expected, and so I must reveal the full truth. Over the years I came to realize that I am not a holy being as everyone believes. All I ever did was help others with my magic, nothing more. But 10 years ago, I began to think only of myself, of how I might obtain ultimate power, unending health, and immortality. Thus I turned to summoning lost souls and channeling their strength into the magical crystals I forged myself. The core of this power lies in the pure concept magic that Akari possesses." Meno realized in horror that Akari was in grave danger, but Orwell continued coldly, "Even now, the purification experiment is being conducted on Akari. It is the same experiment I once performed on the lost soul in your village, whose magic lingered even after death. If not for Flare, who stopped it before completion, I would have claimed that power 10 years ago. And by the way, Meno, it was that experiment which caused your memory loss as a child. For its side effects include erasing memories. That will make it easy for me to control Akari. She will forget everything, and I will make her trust me effortlessly." While Meno struggled against the demon Orwell had summoned with the energy of the crystals, Orwell went on with her confession. "In my very first purification experiment 10 years ago, it was Flare who intervened. She suspected me, she felt I was behind it all, but she could never find proof. Since that time I have watched you grow, seeing in you a renewed reflection of Flare herself. I have waited for the perfect moment to destroy you and erase Flare's legacy from this world forever." Meanwhile, Akari was still bound to the chair, and before her appeared a massive white sphere inching closer. With every moment it drew near, pieces of her memory slipped away. The sorcerers around her whispered that when the experiment ended, her mind would be completely erased. Yet in that moment, all Akari thought of were her memories with Meno. Though simple, they held profound meaning for her. With fierce determination, she declared, "No matter what happens, I will never abandon my memories of Meno." At the final instant, she unleashed her magic, shattering her bonds, annihilating the guards, and seizing the chair before the sphere could reach her, vowing to find Meno and save her from peril. Elsewhere, Momo and Ashuha were still battling the colossal dragon whose overwhelming power defied them both. In one of its ferocious attacks, the beast incinerated Momo's cherished hair ribbons. Something inside her snapped. Her rage ignited, and all the fury she had buried surged outward. She fought with reckless abandon, pouring every ounce of her magic into her assault, caring nothing for her body or health, thinking only of vengeance against the creature that had destroyed her first memory with Meno. Her fury was so immense that she slew the dragon single-handedly and leveled the old palace to the ground. Ashuha stood stunned by the transformation in Momo, but her courage and reckless spirit shielded them both. The princess wielded every magical artifact in her possession, summoning an enormous sword. With a single devastating strike, she cleaved through one of the monsters and brought down an entire building alongside it. At the same time, Momo harnessed the dragon's energy and hurled it toward the church, piercing the protective barrier that Orwell herself had created. Bewildered, Orwell turned to Mino and said, "It seems you truly did train Momo to perfection." At that moment, Akari rushed toward Mino to check on her, but Mino grew angry and said, "Didn't I tell you to run? Why are you throwing yourself into danger?" Akari replied, "I only feel safe when I'm with you, even if we're standing in the midst of peril." Her words gave Mino the resolve to protect her and herself, so she conjured floating bubbles to distract Orwell, while at the same time hurling her dagger toward the reservoirs of magical crystals to destroy them. Yet Orwell evaded the strike and summoned her magical staves to finish off Meno and Akari. When she turned, she was struck with shock, for standing before her was Flare. Overcome with disbelief, she forgot to attack, and that was the very illusion Meno had cast. Seizing the chance, Meno struck again, this time her blade finding its mark, though it was not fatal. Realizing she had no other choice, Meno decided to draw upon the pure concept magic within Akari. She invoked the spell of magical supply and connected visually with Akari to channel her power. In that instant, she was pulled into her own memories, seeing herself as a child walking through the snow, then drowning in a pool of blood while Flare tried desperately to pull her out. Finally, she found herself sitting in the school she had often glimpsed in her visions. There she whispered, "If I end my life now, perhaps I can cross into that world and meet the friend I have always seen, though her face has never been clear to me." Just as she was about to plunge the blade into herself, the friend appeared and stopped her, revealing at last that she was none other than Akari. Akari said, "I will stay by your side no matter where you are, so please, protect your life." Meno snapped out of the memories that had engulfed her, realizing she had absorbed an immense surge of Akari's energy. She unleashed it immediately against Orwell. Despite Orwell's great power, she could not withstand it, and her body crumbled into a skeleton. Her final words were, "I helped everyone, but I could never help myself." With that, Orwell perished after inflicting so much evil upon the world. The following day, news spread across the city, but the church chose to conceal the truth. They declared that a massive dragon had attacked the church and that Orwell had died during the battle. Thus, the people continued to honor her even after her death. Later, Momo met with Minno, still grieving over the loss of her hair ribbons, but her sorrow turned to joy when she discovered that Minno had bought her new ones. Tears streamed down her face as she thanked her. Then she spoke with Akari, saying, "I feel as though I've met you in a parallel world beyond this one, and you feel it too, though you've lost your memories. The proof is that you trusted me the very first time you saw me, clung to me in such a strange way, and tried to protect me at all costs. That is why I will take a long journey with you across the kingdom's cities, searching for a way to end your life so you may return safely to your true world, for this world is too dangerous for you." In that moment, Akari awoke from her own memories, calling out for Menno. When she saw her, she embraced her tightly, weeping as she said, "I had a terrible nightmare." She recalled the vision of Menno dying in her arms and dissolving into shards of ice, followed by Flare appearing to kill her. And though Akari had resigned herself to death, she whispered, "I only wish that it was Menno who ended my life, so that she would be the last person I'd ever see." From the next day onward, Menno began her journey with Akari. Standing before the church, Akari read the inscription upon its plaque. "The church is open to all people, of every race, age, and nation, for there shall be no discrimination among humankind." At that moment, Menno stepped out of the church holding a new book, telling Akari it was the Book of Laws, written by the new head of the church who had taken leadership after Orwell's fall. Then Menno declared, "Now begins our true journey, one that will last 3 months as we travel across every city in the kingdom." Overcome with excitement, Akari turned to her and said, "I am ready for the journey, let's begin it at once." And so Menu and Akari left the city of Garm and began their journey. Akari soon noticed that the path around them was deserted, so she asked Menu about the reason. Menu explained that this was a barren land where life was harsh, food was scarce, and it had long been the home of monsters that frequently attacked humans. Because of this, all who once lived there had abandoned it, and now it served only as a borderland for travelers. Though Akari understood that monsters could appear at any moment, she felt no fear. Instead, she continued her journey with joy and excitement, even walking ahead of Menu in her enthusiasm. But that excitement did not last. For exactly 2 weeks later, Akari began to lose her energy and spirit, saying to Menu, "I am tired of this journey. The road is far too long." Manu reassured her, telling her they had finally reached the borders of the next city, and indeed Akari soon saw it in the distance. After a while they entered the city, and the first thing they beheld was the sea. There, Menu recalled her memories with her mentor Flare, when she had arrived at this island for the first time in her life, and when she first laid eyes upon the sea. She remembered noticing the heavy clouds above the waters, and Flare smiling as she explained, "This is the Pandemonium Storm, the storm that gathers together the 4 sins of mankind. Behind it dwell strange creatures and beasts whose true nature no one knows, for whoever enters the storm never returns, and it remains unknown whether they die or are imprisoned within." Manu was brought back from her memories by Akari's voice urging her, "Let's enter the city quickly, the weather looks stormy." Manu calmed her, saying that the storm was always there, even on sunny days. The first thing Manu did was register her presence at the city's church, as she was still a priestess, and such was required in every church she visited. Afterwards, she returned to Akari, who asked for a tour of the city, and the first place she wished to see was the isolated island in the middle of the sea. But Manu told her that no one visited it, for it was private property belonging to one of the wealthiest rulers of the city, who lived there with his family. Entry was forbidden without his permission, except in cases of utmost necessity. However, she promised Akari to take her the next day on a full tour of the city. That night, Momo arrived and immediately went to see Manu, who asked her why she was delayed, though she had begun her journey earlier than them. Momo explained that she had encountered Princess Ashuha on the road, who had tried to delay her with every excuse, wanting to fight monsters alongside her, for it was clear she loved battle. But Momo managed to trap her inside a cave with monsters and escape at once. Then Momo turned to Manu and said, "The best way to dispose of Akari is to cast her into the Pandemonium Storm. She will never be able to survive it or escape." Though the idea seemed convincing, Manu felt fear at the thought of it succeeding, for she had grown used to Akari's presence and no longer wished to part with her. And so the day ended. The next morning, Manu kept her promise and took Akari on a sea voyage to show her the island from the closest point possible. Along the way, she explained that the island belonged to Lobel, the ruler who had long ago fallen ill and could no longer govern, so his only daughter, Naemon, the 19-year-old heir, had taken charge. Despite her young age, she refused to relinquish her father's island. Akari enjoyed the voyage and Mainu's stories until Mainu offered her pills, claiming they were for seasickness, though in truth, they were sleeping pills. The moment Akari swallowed them, she fell asleep at once. Mainu seized the chance, transferred her to another boat, and guided her into the pandemonium storm. At that moment, Manu's heart was torn in conflict, between her wish that the plan would succeed and return Akari to her world, and her hope that it would fail so Akari might remain by her side longer. The moment Akari entered the storm, her magic awakened and she instantly regained consciousness, finding herself in a bloody sea. With a nervous smile she muttered that she did not like Manu's method, then unleashed her magic and rewound time. At that moment, Akari returned to the boat beside Menno, but she had lost her memory and no longer recalled entering the storm. She merely thought she had dozed off beside Menno during the journey. Joy flickered across Menno's face as she realized the plan had failed, and she told herself she would search for another way later. Meanwhile, on Lobiel Island, Naemon was gathered with her family. They spoke about Menno, who had arrived in the city, calling her their mortal enemy who must be eliminated. When asked her opinion, Naemon said, "We should observe her first. If she poses any danger, then we act." Everyone was shocked by her calm response and asked if she knew who Flare was. Naemon affirmed that she did, that Maino was Flare's disciple, and that Flare was the one responsible for her mother's death. With that, she excused herself and left. Yet as she departed, she overheard them whispering that she was just a child who didn't know how to lead, and that the greatest mistake had been appointing her after her father's death. Their words stung, but Naemon showed no concern and walked away. Her true face, however, emerged once she entered her secret chamber filled with terrifying tools of torture. There, a small girl was imprisoned. Without mercy, Naemon shoved the child into a box lined with blades and iron spikes, closed it shut, and let the blood seep from within as the girl perished. Only then did Naemon's real nature reveal itself behind the mask of innocence and gentleness. Back with Menno, she arrived once again at the shore. From a distance, a mysterious figure watched her and whispered, "At last I've found you. This time, your death will be at my hands, Maino." Later, Maino strolled through the city market with Akari, who was delighted by the unfamiliar goods around her. Suddenly, a man passed by, his gaze fixed intently on them. Despite his attempt to appear casual, he stopped behind them and unleashed a spell aimed at Menno, but she had anticipated the attack, raising a powerful barrier to protect herself. She quickly reassured the panicked townsfolk that they were safe, then handed a dagger to Akari, telling her to guard herself with it until she returned. A fierce battle erupted between Menno and the criminal, but one of the assailants managed to seize the dagger from Akari and threatened her with it. In that instant, Menno realized she was their true target, not Akari. When she demanded to know why, they revealed themselves as members of the same gang of criminals she had slain on the train, now seeking revenge. But their vengeance was short-lived. Menno defeated them all, bound them, and left their bodies lying in the market square before walking away with Akari. Moments later, screams filled the air. Menno rushed back to find the restrained criminals convulsing, their bodies twisting into monstrous shapes before collapsing dead. The chaos drew the attention of the city's high priestess, who confronted Menno, accusing her of causing the disaster and demanding compensation. Menno tried to explain that the criminals had been targeting her, but the priestess's gaze fell on Akari. "You must pay a levy," she declared, "for this girl is not of our kingdom." Menno answered firmly, "She is a lost soul, and I am searching for a way to end her." Yet her words failed to convince the priestess, who insisted Akari must be eliminated, though she finally relented on one condition: Mino must investigate a case threatening the entire city. Mino accepted, took the file, and later discussed it with Momo. It described a mysterious drug spreading rapidly through the city. Anyone who used it became addicted, and with prolonged use, the body twisted into a monstrous form before death. In that moment, Menno understood why the criminals in the market had transformed. It was the drug they were enslaved to. She tasked Momo with uncovering its source. Meanwhile, Naemon once again gathered with her family and delivered a shocking confession. She herself was the one producing the drug. They were stunned and demanded an explanation. With a cold smile she said, "I make it for money. The more it spreads, the richer I become. And this is the perfect way to welcome Menno, the disciple of Flare, who was the reason my mother died. If you thought I would ever abandon my revenge, you were wrong. I will make her pay dearly." As they argued, one of the women in the family suddenly convulsed, her body twisting grotesquely, before she strangled herself and died. Panic swept the room as no one understood what had just happened. but Naaman laughed maniacally and declared, "I mixed the drug into all your meals. That means the poison runs in every one of your veins." Terror spread through the chamber as they realized death could strike any of them next. At that moment, the very box in which Naaman had killed the young girl began to ooze blood mixed with crystalline shards of the drug, revealing the horrifying truth that it was being crafted from the blood of innocent children. Elsewhere, Momo had captured a vagrant and was ruthlessly torturing him to extract information about this dark and deadly substance. At that moment, the vagrant insisted he knew nothing about the drug, for their leaders had forbidden them from approaching it. Then the true leader appeared, revealed to be Princess Ashuha, who could hardly believe that Momo had survived the beasts of the cave. Ashuha said coldly, "I am stronger than you could ever imagine." Momo realized that Ashuha possessed valuable information about the drug, but refused to accept it from her and resolved instead to rely on her own investigation. Afterward, she met with Mino and told her she had found nothing, though Ashuha seemed to hold vital knowledge. Mino answered, "I will investigate myself as well, and the banquet that Naaman is hosting on the island will be the perfect chance, for many people will gather there, and I shall collect the information I need." On the following day, the day of the banquet, Momo stood at a distance watching Meno enter the castle. Her heart tightened when she saw that Akari was entering with her. How can she attend when she is not of the kingdom, she thought, not knowing that the high priestess herself had arranged a special invitation for Akari. Meanwhile, the guests assembled in Castle Lobel, awaiting the festivities. At last, Naaman appeared, greeting all in attendance, and as her gaze swept the crowd, it fell upon Meno. A sly smile curved her lips, for she realized her plan was unfolding exactly as she had designed. Thus began the episode with Meno and Akari, who had managed to gain entry to the banquet after Meno arranged a false invitation for Akari under the guise of being one of the church's priestesses. Akari was so delighted that she proudly told every guest she met that she was a priestess, until Meno, exasperated, scolded her. "You are drawing attention to yourself, and this is dangerous. If anyone learns who you truly are, you will not leave this place alive." She ordered her to speak to no one and remain seated apart from the crowd until she returned, for she intended to search the castle for evidence concerning the drug. Akari trembled at the thought of being left alone, but Meno assured her she would not be long. Leaving the banquet hall, Meno wandered through the gardens, until suddenly she heard a voice behind her. It was Ashuha. "It seems Naaman has many enemies," she said. "I am not the only one searching into her affairs. Yet since I have caught you, I must know who you are and why you prowl her castle." Meno refused to reveal her true identity, claiming she was merely a guest who had noticed a servant fleeing the hall and had followed her to see where she was going. Ashuha did not believe her. She stepped closer, trying to glimpse Meno's face. Meno turned away, keeping it hidden, and this only deepened Ashuha's suspicions. "I am certain now that you are no guest," she declared. "You are a spy, and perhaps even a knight of the city. Since you refuse to confess, we must fight and see which of us prevails." At that, Meno uncovered her face and accepted the challenge. The two clashed swiftly, their skills so closely matched it seemed they were equals. Yet in the end, Meno gained the upper hand. She cast a spell that disoriented Ashuha, then seized the opening to drive her dagger home, leaving the princess fallen and writhing in pain. At that moment, Ashuha said to Meno, "This is the first time in many years that I have lost a battle, and that only proves how truly strong you are." Then she attempted one last strike with her sword, hoping to wound her, but Meno evaded the blow and managed to escape. In that instant, Ashuha noticed a coin engraved with Meno's name. She recalled the words of Momo, who had repeated that same name, and suddenly realized that this was indeed the priestess responsible for Momo and her only friend. Meanwhile, Akari watched the flames bursting from Ashuha's sword, fear tightening her chest as she thought Meno might be in grave danger. She called upon her powers and turned back time to save her, but something strange occurred. This time, after rewinding, she lost every memory of what had happened only moments earlier. Not only that, she could no longer see the future or foresee what awaited them. Panic rose within her, for her strength was beginning to fade in a way she could not understand. At that moment, Naaman approached her and began speaking, asking Akari her name and her role. Yet from the weight of her fear and confusion, Akari could not answer. Naaman, however, did not leave her in peace. Instead, she introduced herself as the mistress of the castle and stepped closer, running her fingers through Akari's hair as she whispered, "My mother's hair was the same color as yours." Then, without hesitation, she revealed her true intent. "I will let you go today, because the thing I have been searching for all this time lies within you. But if you manage to leave this island, take my advice and run, for next time, I will not spare you." With those chilling words she departed, leaving Akari trembling. Her mind raced. What does Naaman want from me? Will she try to harm Meno? That thought alone terrified her more than anything else, and in her heart she vowed that she must act on her own to save both Meno and herself from Namon's malice. At the same time, Meno had returned to the banquet hall searching desperately for Akari, but she could find no trace of her anywhere. The only thing she discovered was Akari's holy book, left abandoned upon the balcony. While Meno searched, another story unfolded elsewhere. Momo had tracked her way to the site where the mysterious drug was being produced. After defeating the guard and threatening him, she forced her way into the main chamber of production. There before her stood the cursed box from which the tainted pills were drawn. When she wrenched it open, horror consumed her. Inside lay a young child imprisoned, her very blood being drained to forge the drug. Momo rushed to pull her free, desperate to save her, but it was too late. The girl was already dead. And worse still, the moment Momo removed her from the box, a self-destruction mechanism activated. The chamber erupted in a violent explosion, and one of the massive iron spikes from the box pierced deep into Momo's body, leaving her gravely wounded. At that moment, Momo realized she had been poisoned, as she felt the venom spreading through her body and draining her strength, so she immediately reached out to Meno for help. Indeed, Meno arrived just in time to save her. The next day, Momo awoke to find herself in the church's infirmary, with Meno sitting at her side, reassuring her that she was safe now. Meno also told her that she had seen everything recorded in her sacred book and had discovered that Namon was behind the production of the narcotics. Meno then told Momo to rest and assured her that she would personally confront Namon. Afterward, Meno went to meet the high priestess of the church and asked about Momo's condition. The priestess explained that the poison she had been struck with was extremely potent and had already spread through much of her body, though they were doing their best to treat it and reduce its effects. She then asked about Akari, to which Meno replied that she still could not locate her, but she was certain Akari was not kidnapped. Perhaps she had simply wandered off after leaving the banquet and lost her way, and vowed that she would not stop searching until she found her. Meno then shifted the conversation to the narcotics, confirming that all the evidence pointed to Namon and her family as the masterminds behind their creation. She requested the priestess to dispatch the army to surround and arrest them. The priestess complied, sending a battalion to secure the entire island of Lobel, demanding Namon, her family, and their followers surrender, since their guilt in the narcotics case was now beyond dispute. Panic swept through the family, and they convened an urgent meeting to decide how to deal with the disaster Namon had brought upon them, while Namon herself remained unnervingly calm and cold, as though nothing had happened. Before leaving her chambers to join the meeting, Namon noticed that her family's portrait had shifted slightly from its place on the wall, but she dismissed the thought and walked on. The moment she entered the council hall, however, she was stunned to see everyone frozen in place, their bodies locked as though time itself had stopped. At once, she realized that Akari was present and that she had used her power to halt time. Indeed, Akari then revealed herself and said, "I need to speak with you, and you must answer the questions that haunt my mind." Her first question was, "How did you learn about my magical power?" Namon smirked and replied, "I learned it from the chaos storm. Would you believe me if I told you I managed to stop a storm that had raged for 1,000 years? Her words left Akari in shock, unable to believe what she was hearing. She pressed further. "I heard your family speak of vengeance. Why do you seek to exact revenge on Meno?" At that moment, Namon revealed a harrowing truth. "My mother was not from this world. She too was a lost soul from Japan. My father was the one who found her, memoryless and disoriented. At first, he sought to use her magical power for his own gain. But with time, he fell in love with her, married her, and I became their only child. Because of his love, he refused to exploit her power. For every time it was used, she was destined to lose her memories. He could not bear the thought of erasing the happiness they had shared together." Namon's expression then darkened as she continued, "But fate does not grant peace. One day, as I sat with my mother in the palace garden, she confessed to me that I had an older sister. Before she could finish, the blade of an executioner pierced her heart and ended her life. That executioner was none other than Flare, Mino's mentor." Stunned, Akari asked, "So, you want revenge on Mino because her teacher Flare killed your mother?" But Namon shook her head and denied it. "After my mother's death, my family began pressuring my father to find another lost soul. But to silence them, he claimed that I had inherited her magical powers. As I grew, it became clear that I was just an ordinary human, and they sank into disappointment. The mockery only deepened when I inherited the rule of the island after my father. They constantly belittled me, calling me weak and worthless. So I resolved to prove that I was stronger than them all, capable of anything they could not imagine. That is when I turned to the forbidden arts and embraced the path of the occult. As she recounted her tale, Namen was simultaneously using the blood extracted from the narcotic capsules to draw runes across the floor. When the sigils were complete, her forbidden magical energy erupted around her, radiating with an intensity far beyond Akari's power. In that instant, Akari finally understood why her strength always weakened in Namen's presence. Suddenly, Namen unleashed her sorcery against her, and Akari, still shaken and paralyzed by fear, could not move. At the very last moment, however, Meno arrived and shielded Akari, saving her from Namen's devastating strike. At that moment, Mino leapt from the window carrying Akari in her arms, and once she was assured of her safety, she ordered her to leave the island at once, telling her that the army forces were stationed at the island's entrance, and that she must inform them immediately and request the presence of the High Priestess. After Akari left, Mino resolved to face Naman herself, while Naman's overwhelming magical energy surrounded her from every direction. Mino declared, "Unfortunately, I must kill you as well, just as your mother died." But her words had no effect on Namen, who began to laugh hysterically, as though nothing mattered anymore, before challenging Mino and hurling herself into a fierce battle. Meanwhile, Princess Ashoha learned that Namen's family had surrendered, and that one of them confessed to being the leader of the drug manufacturing syndicate. She immediately set off to personally oversee his interrogation. Back at the castle, the duel between Mino and Namen raged on, and it soon became clear that Mino was superior. She managed to sever Namen's arm. At that, Namen said, "The fight is over. You are the victor, Mino. This is the best I can do. I cannot resist you any longer. My role in this life has ended, and since I know you cannot bring yourself to kill a human the way you slay stray souls, I shall end it myself. But before I go, I will give you a small gift so you will never forget me." Suddenly, Namen's body began to collapse, and from its fragments emerged a small child. The sight was even more horrifying when Mino realized this was the very same girl whose blood Namen had used to create the drugs. Shocked and confused, Mino did not know what to make of it. The child at first behaved normally, which made Mino strike her down immediately, convinced she was nothing more than a disguised monster. But terror deepened when another identical child emerged from the corpse. In that instant, Mino understood she was facing a monster, or a cursed black magic creation, left behind by Namen. The child spoke, "Do not bother trying to destroy me. There are countless copies of me." Then she twisted her neck in a grotesque manner until she killed herself, and from her body erupted massive, terrifying beasts, from one of which the child emerged again. Mino demanded, "Who are you? What do you want from us?" The child replied coldly, "I am that which despises humankind. I am that which always seeks their annihilation. I am the four human sins. I am the maker of Haraj." At the same time, the old man under interrogation on the island began to transform into molten volcanic lava, confirming that the catastrophe striking the island was indeed bound to the use of black magic. Mino, still stunned by the monster now embodied as a child before her, asked, "How can you be Haraj, when Haraj is a storm upon the sea?" The child answered, "The Haraj storm was named after me, for I am the four human sins." Mino then used a magical rope to bind her, forcing the child to fall to the ground. But shock followed as another version of her appeared behind Mino and said to the first, "You are weak, therefore you must be eliminated." She killed her counterpart instantly. At that moment, Mino realized that this entity possessed multiple lives, resurrecting anew each time it died. And she understood it was the one that had manipulated Namen, forcing her to create the drug-infused pills from its blood to amplify its own power. Mino confronted her with this truth, but the child answered with a mocking smile, "You are wrong. I do not wish to destroy the world. All I want is to produce a film. Yet since this world has no films, I decided to create a horror movie in reality. And you shall be its heroine. The heroine who dies at the end." Meanwhile, Akari had gone to visit Momo to check on her, saying, "Though I dislike you for always trying to take Mino away from me, I must save you, because Mino cares for you deeply and she would suffer terribly if anything happened to you." She then used her magic to heal her, and left. The effects of her spell soon took hold and Momo at last opened her eyes. As for Princess Ashoha, she received horrifying reports from across the city. More than 100 people had transformed into the same form as the old man, and then vanished without a trace. At that moment, Princess Ashoha decided to go to the island herself to see what was happening there. We return to Mino, who was facing a new catastrophe, for Haraj had carved a deep tunnel into the earth from which dozens of enormous beasts emerged, all directed toward Mino to destroy her. Mino unleashed a powerful magical incantation that created a barrier to keep the monsters from reaching her, but Haraj did not relent. Instead, she multiplied the number of beasts, tearing off one of her own hands and casting it to the rats, which devoured it. The hand then transformed into a gigantic, terrifying rat that also sought to reach Mino. forced to reinforce her barrier. Mino's strength began to wane from the immense energy she had expended. Haraj seized the opportunity, transforming her remaining hand into a massive arm that struck Mino with such force it sent her flying, and she was about to crush her again when a sword cleaved her arm before it could land. It was Princess Ashuha who had finally arrived on the island. Ashuha stood by Mino and said, "Consider this the first time we meet and truly know each other." She then asked if that small child was the cause of 100 people melting away in the city. Mino answered, yes, she is the embodiment of humanity's 4 sins, known as Haraj. She uses the souls of those who became addicted to the drug made from her blood to resurrect herself again and again. Mino then urged Ashuha to join forces with her, insisting that only together could they defeat Haraj once and for all. Ashoha agreed, and the two prepared for battle. Mino summoned a powerful incantation called the Binding Magic of Heaven and Earth and cast it upon Ashuha's sword. In that instant, the princess wielded her blade to spread the enchantment, which stretched from the depths of the earth to the heights of the sky. The overwhelming energy drew Haraj into its grasp, and she began to dissolve piece by piece until she was sealed as a radiant crystal within the spell. Thus, Mino and Ashuha succeeded in imprisoning Haraj's evil forever. Mino thanked the princess for her aid in defeating Haraj, but Ashuha, still troubled, asked about Momo, who was supposed to meet them the previous day. Mino explained that Momo had been injured while seeking evidence against Naman, but she had saved her, and her condition was now improving. As they spoke, the buildings around them suddenly began to collapse, and from the sea emerged a colossal monster, far larger than anything they had ever seen. It was so massive that Akari could see it even from the church. Overcome with fear for Mino, she resolved to go to her aid, but froze in shock when she found Haraj standing before her in the room, blocking her way. With a cold smile, Haraj whispered, "The film would be boring if you joined in, so stay with me here and let us play together." At that moment, Princess Ashoha managed to save herself and Mino from the collapsing building, but neither of them understood the reason behind the appearance of the massive beast in the sea after they had already defeated Haraj. To their shock, another version of her appeared before them, declaring, "The movie is not over yet, it still has a sequel." The two were stunned, realizing that Haraj was still present, and despite all the power they had unleashed, they had failed to end her. Yet Mino uncovered a crucial truth. The beast in the sea had not died, but it could not escape from the storm of Haraj on its own. Haraj had merely used it to distract and frighten them. Mino confronted her and said, "You are not the true Haraj, for if you were, your power would be far greater than this. All you are doing is distracting us, and even your weak monsters are easy for us to defeat." The copy then admitted, "You are right. I am not the real one, merely a replica. The true Haraj is still imprisoned within the storm." She could only move her fingers, and from that little power, she created me and many others to destroy the city. But tell me, what do you think will happen when the true Haraj is finally freed from her prison? Then she turned to Mino and added coldly, "You are the only one who knows the reason behind all of this, because you have a hand in it." Her words made Mino suspect Akari, believing she was the cause of the chaos. She thought to herself, "I must hurry and kill Akari to protect her and save her from this world." Meanwhile, Akari stood before another replica of Haraj. The creature tore off its own arms and sent them to strangle her. At the last second, Akari saved herself and demanded, "Why are you doing this?" Haraj replied, "I only want to play with someone from my world, for I too come from Japan. Do you still remember your memories of Japan? Or do they vanish each time you use your magic?" Akari realized the truth and said, "The sins of mankind exist in this world, not in Japan. That means you are lying." Then she confessed, "Yes, my memories of Japan are fading, but that does not matter. I lived in an empty, meaningless world. But here, I live with my dearest friend, the one willing to sacrifice herself to save me." With that, Akari unleashed her magic upon Haraj to destroy her, and in doing so, lost her final memory of her old world. She believed she had defeated her, but was horrified when Haraj reappeared before her and said, "The reason I appeared, the reason all of this is happening in the city, is you. When you entered the storm of Haraj and used your magic to rewind time, you created a gap within the storm. Through that gap, the true Haraj, who had been bound for centuries, managed to move her fingers for the first time, and from that, she created countless copies of me to ravage the city. I am one of those copies." Akari froze in shock, realizing that she was the cause of all the chaos, and she did not know how to mend the destruction she had unleashed. At that same moment, Mino and Ashoha faced yet another replica of Haraj. The creature sneered, "Now it is time for the film to move into its second act. This is the perfect moment for me to unleash all the souls I have devoured from the city." Before their eyes, she transformed into a massive, monstrous form. Roaring, "Now begins the true battle!" Mino and Ashoha steeled themselves for combat, and a fierce battle erupted against the towering beast. Yet they soon realized that every strike only caused parts of her body to break off, which then reassembled again. Ashoha deduced the only way to kill her was to strike her as many times as the number of souls she had consumed to forge her body. She declared, "If we do this, we can end her once and for all." Haraj mocked them. "You will never have the time to manage such a feat, for I will destroy you both before that happens." But Mino and Ashoha refused to give up and press the assault, even as fragments of her body split off and fled into the city, spreading terror among its people. Mino then urged Ashoha to go protect the townsfolk while she stayed to fight Haraj alone. Ashoha accepted and rushed off toward the city, while Mino continued her relentless attack, determined to finish it quickly. Yet Haraj struck back with devastating force, knocking Mino far from her holy book, the very artifact that sealed spirits. Standing over her, Haraj said coldly, "Now you have lost all your power. You will never be able to stand against me again." At that moment, the Haraj launched a fierce assault on Mino from every direction, nearly tearing her in two, but Princess Ashoha hurled her sword toward Mino and shouted, "Use my sword and save yourself! Do not worry about me, I can fight without it." Mino seized the blade at once and began to strike the Haraj with all her might. Meanwhile, Akari had reached the city and was battling the hordes of monsters that blocked her path, determined to reach Mino, who was still locked in combat with the Haraj at the very limits of her strength. The Haraj cried out, "This is your end, Mino," and charged at her with all its beasts. But in the very last instant, time froze and wound backward. It was Akari who appeared, having used her magic to save Mino. She pulled her away and said urgently, "What are you doing here? This place is far too dangerous for you." But Akari answered with resolve, "I had to come and help you. Please, Mino. Use my magic, save yourself, and save the world." Mino then realized this was the only way to end the chaos. Together, she and Akari united their strength, channeling it through Ashoha's sword to forge a colossal blade of pure magic. With a single strike, they brought it down upon the Haraj. Instantly, its monstrous power collapsed, and it shrank from a towering beast into a frail, withering husk crumbling on the ground in its final moments. Akari, relieved, believed the threat was over, yet she chose to erase her own memories, whispering, "I don't want to remember anything from this dreadful battle." She cast her magic upon herself and fell unconscious, while Mino smiled gently and carried her to a safe place. Then, Mino approached the dying Haraj and declared, "In the end you have lost, and I am the one who prevailed. You could not destroy me." With broken breaths, the Haraj replied, "Destroying you was never my true aim. My purpose was only to spread chaos, for that is my destiny." Then it added, "But before I die, I will give you a gift. On an island in the heart of the sea lies the Salt Sword, the only blade that can kill Akari. Will you have the strength to use it against her, or will you turn away? I am glad that my final act before death was sowing confusion in your mind, leaving you torn." These were its last words before fading away, leaving Mino drowning in inner conflict. Part of her heart yearning to keep Akari by her side in this world, while the other resolved to slay her and return her to her true home. And at that very time, in the underworld, Naaman suddenly opened her eyes. She found herself still alive, overwhelmed with shock, for she had been utterly certain that she had died. At that moment, the figure of Haraj appeared before Naaman and said, "You were indeed dead, and it was I who used my magic and the corpses of other dead to restore your body and bring you back to life." Shock spread across Naaman's face, for she could not comprehend why anyone would help her return from death. But then she remembered her mother's words, when she had once told her that she had another sister. The girl standing before her bore the exact same features described by her mother. In that instant, Naaman realized the truth. This was her real sister. The two of them agreed to unite, swearing to destroy the world together. Meanwhile, Momo had finally recovered from her illness, so Mino came to check on her. Mino told her everything that had happened during her sickness, and in the end, revealed the existence of the Salt Sword, the only blade capable of killing Akari. She declared that on the following day she would travel with Akari to the island of Salt, and that this time she would end her life before losing control of her magic and turning into a corrupted being. Afterward, Mino went to the high priestess of the church, who thanked her for all she had done to protect the city. But before she left, the high priestess said, "You are different from your master, Flare. That is why you must walk your own path, away from the one she forced upon you." These words struck Mino deeply, leaving her to wonder, what if I truly choose my own path and decide not to kill Akari? Will I regret it, or will it be the right choice? Later, Mino went to check on Akari, only to be shocked to find that she had lost all her memories from the night of the banquet until the great battle. The only thing Akari could recall was being with Mino at the banquet, nothing beyond that. As for Momo, she sat in silence thinking to herself, I know it will be too difficult for you, Mino, to kill Akari with your own hands. That is why I will volunteer to do it in your place. And so the day came to an end. The next morning, Mino and Akari set out on their new journey. As always, Akari was cheerful and excited to be traveling alongside Mino. But Mino, burdened by guilt, knew the journey would end with Akari's death. Still, she resolved to treasure every moment with her until the very last breath. Elsewhere, in a hidden place, Flare appeared, watching every movement Mino made. And here, the chilling truth was revealed. Flare was still alive, observing everything from the shadows. When she witnessed the chaos that had erupted due to Mino's hesitation in killing Akari, she whispered coldly, the time has come. This time, I will kill Mino for the millionth time. Thus ended the first season of our tale. Yet the mysteries and secrets remain far from over. The curtain falls on this chapter of the story, leaving us to await what the coming seasons will unveil.